I'm gonna. All right. Good morning, everybody. It's 9:30 on Thursday, Friday, June 21st, and our final meeting for the fiscal year of the Bylaws Subcommittee is called to order. Could everybody introduce themselves? I just want to welcome our chair, NCAC Chair Mark Everett. Hi, Mark. And we have guest Tom Prohodich is here. And then can the committee members please introduce themselves? I'm chair and I have no conflicts.
Wyatt Angelo, no conflicts.
Susan Schomburg, no conflicts.
Tom Sipe, editor, no conflicts.
And Michael, you're muted, and welcome. I think we need to see you and hear you, Michael. Well, Michael will join us at some point here. So you there, Michael? I think you just need to unmute. So did everybody have a chance to look at Michael's minutes from the last two meetings?
Yeah, I learned two words. Actually,
Yeah.
I learned one word. I started to look up the other one and and decided, oh, I need to show up at the meeting. Assuming,
Yeah,
I think I know what that
learned
other word means, so I'm okay with the minutes.
All right. I learned a new word as well. So the minutes, for those of you who just joined us, are on the link to the documents. If you go to the event page, all the documents are linked there. And anyway, are there any additional corrections or any corrections to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, the minutes for the May 3rd meeting and the May 17th meeting are approved as presented. Thank you very much, Michael.
Good morning. I was having
Good morning.
Because when I logged on, it said it was recording, and you have to affirm that you know it's recording before it will allow you to unmute or do anything else. So
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. What were the two words, Tom?
You're gonna make me pronounce them. It was let's see, encomium.
Encomium. Encomium. Yes.
Encomium, a great word. And the other one would not copy correctly out of it. So it was the one that talked about the way that the things were organized. Seriatim, seriatim.
Oh yeah, seriatim. Yeah, that's yeah, that's taking pieces one by one. Encomium is a statement of high respect and recognition.
Yeah, I got that one, and that was added to my vocabulary.
Yeah, it's a lovely word. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
And the seriatim is how we got the bylaws approved. So
that's right. Yeah,
I do want to pass on that Bill Miller is unavailable for today, but he asked me to please say hi to everybody, and he is not going to be joining us for next year, but he gives his warm appreciation. And Mark, since you're here, I just want to thank you so much for all of your support over the past year as we've developed these bylaws. And also, you just did a great job running a tough meeting to run to approve the bylaws on May 11th. So thank you very much for everything.
Oh, well, thank you. Actually, the bylaws has done such a wonderful job that it was easy, and it was nice actually to go through the process of having some motions and amendments, and it was nice. The whole thing was long, but it was very well done, and thanks to the bylaws.
Thank you. And I think for Michael and me, we both really enjoyed having some parliamentary procedures actually in action. And Michael, you did a great job on the training. So thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Michael, do you have any conflicts?
I have no conflicts or objections.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go on to my report. I don't expect Sarah to be here today. I think so I've taken her off the agenda, but actually just to go through the agenda, we have the chairperson's report, and then just a brief follow-up on bylaws, and then going to the policies and procedures discussion, as well as a new action plan. And then I'd like to discuss calendar for upcoming meetings. So for the summer, as well as looking at possibly changing our meeting times for next year. I would normally just wait until after the election meeting tomorrow, but I'm not getting any indication that anyone's running to join us. So if so, then
Nobody
we can.
wants.
I'm
we
not
have
hearing
fun.
anything. So you know, we could
Wow.
always revisit meeting dates if we have a surprise tomorrow. But for now, it looks like it'll be the five of us. Somebody could surprise us though. So and then just kind of an action item summary. So since we have so few today, please just consider this pretty informal. And Tom and Mark, if you have anything to comment on as we go through, just please feel free to do that. And of course, either of you are welcome to be part of the committee as chair. Mark, you're kind of an ad hoc member anyway, and welcome to come anytime. Tom, you are sort of an unofficial member as well, Tom Prohodge. So we had our executive board meeting on Tuesday night, and I think it went well. We're getting quite a bit of kudos, it sounds like, from Sarah Absher and others for the bylaws. And Sarah has let me know, and I understand, Mark, she's let you know as well, that the attorney has officially approved our bylaws. And so that's nice to hear. Haven't received anything in writing, but I'm not expecting a problem. So, is that correct, Mark?
Yeah, I at the last CAC chairs meeting in early June, she went on about how well the bylaws were done by the bylaws committee here in Nesquin, and I think they've been impressed across certainly at the county level, but also in other CACs are starting to really hear about the bylaws. So I don't worry about, I don't know when the official written document's going to come through, but I think for all intents and purposes, it's done. And kudos to the bylaws committee for just a process that was super well run. So.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's been a terrific committee to work with. As I mentioned, the election meeting is tomorrow. And at this point, the vice chair and treasurer positions look like they're running unopposed for re-election. Again, anyone can nominate from the floor. So that can, as long as they qualify for membership. So who knows, we might have some surprises, and the same with the bylaws committee at this point. The five of us have self-nominated, and we'll see how that goes. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a fairly easy meeting. Hopefully, there'll be a very brief input from the bylaws subcommittee, just basically to say that we have done our bylaws and thank the community for their support. It's going to be very brief. The community plan subcommittee will have a little bit longer presentation, but the agenda is on the events page for this meeting for tomorrow. At this point, it sounds like if we are running unopposed, we won't need to be making verbal statements. But if anyone does self-nominate, we may be asked to just make a verbal statement. So it'd be good for us all to be there if we can. But again, we have 2 available slots as well. So I don't anticipate any issues. It'd be great if we could get another 1 or 2 people to join us for the coming year. Tom. Otherwise, I think things are good. The budget's going to be presented tomorrow as well for the coming year. So we did talk briefly about Tom Sipe. I know you were interested in having us possibly get our own seat our own Zoom ID for meetings. And so I have brought that up the last couple of times, but right now the budget doesn't permit. If it becomes another big issue, like when we ran into problems with the feedback sessions where we were trying to do polling and then somebody else with the ID, even though they weren't signed in with the NCAC ID, they were signed in for their personal ID, came in, it knocked our polling off. So if that becomes another issue, I could always just put in the money to get another seat, but it can't just be a personal one because like Jeff needs to be able to get in and record everything and have, it needs to not just be a personal ID. So if necessary, it's another $150. It's not a lot, but so that will be happening tomorrow as well. Otherwise, was there anything else in the executive board meeting that you'd like to mention, Mark?
No, I don't think there's
Okay.
anything else. No.
Okay. So another thing, Jeff sent out a email blast and he's asking for interested people for the outreach and communications task forces, which I'm really pleased to see the follow-up on. So I know some of you have indicated an interest on getting involved with those task forces, and I hope you will. And I think those will be very exciting. And then one of the things we'll be talking about as we do policies and procedures is possibly following up on Guy Sievert's suggestion to have a monitoring task force. And so that's something that the new board may want to also consider following up on, to do some of the things we've talked about before, where Guy is doing, sounds like a tremendous amount of work to follow up with all these different agencies on different things and then report back to the NCAC about anything that's happening, as well as provide input to those groups. So in more of an official capacity. So I think that'll be follow-up for next year. So I think that's about it. We should also probably talk maybe after the election meeting at our next meeting. Do we want to do any switches around? Do you want a different chair? Secretary, editor positions are up. I don't want to assume. So we're not reelected yet, so it's a little premature, but think about that. And that's all I had. So bylaws follow up. I think at this point we've pretty well covered that. I don't think there's a lot to cover now. I do anticipate in the next year that as we do policies and procedures, we may have some things where we'll want to go do a tweak on bylaws, but they'll be more minor. And I think I kind of see us as having it'll be something to talk about as we get into policies and procedures, but we may have some policies and procedures to update throughout the year. It doesn't have to be one big, huge meeting with all of them as we do them. They're a little more routine. We're basically going to be developing a policy manual that doesn't exist currently. And so that will involve some of the officers as well in the areas that affect them particularly. So at this point, does anyone have any questions at this point before we get into policies and procedures? Any comments? Okay. So policies and procedures, I want to apologize because I feel like it's sort of out of commission here. I was traveling and then we had guests and anyway, life has happened. So I have not been as up as I was hoping to be in terms of our actual discussion on them, but I think that's fine. We've got some time. I do have a plan, kind of a blank plan in the documents folder that I will share here in a moment for us to fill in. And then I do have a really, really rough list of kind of an R5 document that I'll share that has some of our listings. It's a combination of Tom's Hype's document that actually lists descriptions of policies and procedures along with some topics to go into. So it's extremely rough. But my feeling is that as we sign up for various areas of the policies and procedures, the people responsible for those areas can really flesh out the topic list as well. So, with that said, why don't do you want to see the topic list first? Why don't we go into the topic list first, and then we can go into the project plan. Let me bring that up. Okay, can you see that okay?
Yep.
You should see a map. Is it big enough? Let me make it a little bigger here. So this is actually pretty finished here. This says revision 4. Should probably say revision 5. Top. And it's really not even an official one.
If you haven't
Okay.
uploaded it, it's revision.
I have not
5.
uploaded it.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
It's definitely revision 5, and we may be changing some of this today as we're going through things. So this is the original map that came out of the bylaws that Tom moved over into policies and procedures. So some of these things came from Wyatt in an email, and you can see that I've done a really crappy job of, a bad job of the formatting is bad, but anyway, it captures some of the different areas of what we needed to look at. So like Wyatt was suggesting, feel free to talk about it, Wyatt, that we need to flesh out some of the specific things about member access, and other things like that. So we also need to have a contact us tab currently on the website. I actually think one of the to-dos I'd like to work on in the coming year is a bylaws subcommittee webpage where we can capture all of our things, all of our activities in a more easily findable area on the website. We have information on how suggested format for reports to outside agencies or also getting input from outside agencies. And so this is, I think, the guy's monitoring thing. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah. Yeah, anytime we have an official document output that needs to have certain things in it and and identification. So, and that's something that I think we just need to make sure that we have at least a description of what it's meant to look like, what information is there.
Right. So part of that is the minority and majority reports from meetings, so from Article 5, and then also this monitoring thing of guys. So
yeah.
Would it help us to have a session with each officer or principal to interview them regarding issues that they experience in the activities that they're involved in, questions that come up in their mind, road bumps, speed bumps, and those kinds of things, or unclear ways of handling their objectives, and just learn about what it is to be them in their areas, so that we can, because I'm a little troubled trying to think of policies and procedures that we want to project onto others. That's my concern.
No, that's a really good point, Michael. And actually, yes, we've talked with the officers about getting involved with the policies and procedures document. So I think I almost put in a column actually on the project plan that would have officers in there, because I think when we get into the little 2-person groups, we can actually involve officers. We just can't have our committee members be more than 2, but we could certainly have officers come in and talk. So particularly our Article 4 officers, they're going to definitely need to have input on all of that, because we don't know what their needs are going to be. It's going to be a much closer look than, I mean, we've involved the officers all along, but for the policies and procedures where we're getting into more of the nitty gritty, I know they've all said it would have helped them when they came on board to have this kind of a document. And they're going to be the best people to provide that input.
Well, and it also seems to me that we need to push that up to soon. Make it
Mhm.
soon, because Mark is stepping down, and we're going to have a new secretary and so on. And there's some historical data and things that those two folks are dealing with that we need to get down early.
I'm a little bit concerned about having Jeff write down all the things he does.
Yeah, yeah, he does a lot.
Because when he looks at that list, he's, never mind.
Yeah. So that actually was something that I think is going to be announced tomorrow that we were asked not to mention. So but yes, we definitely need to get to people quickly. So what Michael's talking about, Mark, would you like to comment?
Sure. Let me get my camera on here. So I'll be stepping down from the chair position. I'll stay on until there's a transition to a new chairperson. Hopefully that'll happen in August. So I'm going to be stepping down, and also Jeff. I mean, I'll just announce for that part too, that Jeff's going to be stepping down, and both of us have sort of the same timeline for transitioning to a new chair and a new secretary. Hopefully that'll be by August. And that'll be announced tomorrow at the general meeting, at the end of the meeting, under announcements. So
Yeah, we're sorry to see both of you go, but those positions, I think Mark, you indicated, and I know Jeff indicated that they'll be available to still help support and that kind of thing and provide input.
Yeah.
I would think on developing this document as well, right? So.
And I would just add, and I said this yesterday, or no, maybe not yesterday, Tuesday, I guess it was, that I do think that the folks that are engaged in the NCAC, whether you're on a committee or whether you're Tom's very engaged in this. Everybody that's engaged, they're just doing a wonderful job. I mean, it's running very well, I think. And so, and that's a credit to everybody who has chosen to throw their hat in the ring and be involved in one way or another. And I think that the NCAC is running really well right now, and I have full confidence that it'll continue to run well with whoever steps into the two vacant positions. So it's really, I mean, Jeff and I have done some work, but it's really the work of the community that has brought this along. So I have to say I'm not really worried. I think it's in really good hands. So.
Well, I also want to give kudos to you guys. I think it's a completely different feel now than it was a year ago. And I think having the Oregon public meeting law that you've brought into it has made a huge difference. I think the trust has been built quite a bit. So I'm sorry to see you stepping back, because I think you've done a terrific job. But.
Well, that was initially, that was actually one of my big goals, was to just try, and I know Oregon public meeting law it's not easy, but it's very, very transparent, and everything is, anybody can see anything, anytime now, and be involved in the process. And I think that's huge. And I think that goes a long way. As long as that continues, I think everything's going to go really well. So.
Hey, Nancy, can I say something?
You bet, Tom.
Well, first of all, I'll keep this confidential. I'm the one person who's, I don't want to preempt you and let you say what you have to say tomorrow without interference. But Mark, I'm really disappointed that you're stepping down, I think, and I am Jeff too, but I'll communicate to Jeff when I see him.
Yeah.
I think you've done a great job, and I would support you for another term next year. I think you've really struck a very fair, neutral balance, and been a very good leader of this organization. I want you to know that, and I'm hoping by tomorrow you'll reconsider.
Yeah. Yes.
Well,
Anyway.
thank you, Tom. Thank you.
I realize the number of meetings were certainly not what you were thinking they would be, but I also don't think the chair has to be at every meeting either. So
Yeah, I know.
I think
Well,
we
thanks
kind
very
of
much.
scared you off. So yes, Michael, to get back to what you were saying, I agree that we definitely need to be involving the officers in this. So any other comments on that before we go back through to the list? Okay. Anyway, there's just a ton of stuff on certain of these areas. So officers is certainly one where there's going to have to be, we really need to clean up secretary, where we kind of left a lot of we combined some of there's not as much detail as there was in the bylaws. We did some combining, but trying to get some of it moved over to the communications task force a little more fully, and have more of the detail kinds of things. And then probably this will be an area where we go back to the bylaws and clean up some of that, particularly in the secretary area. This is one from Wyatt about, I think we should provide a pre-approval process for expenses incurred personally by officers, so they know that they're going to be reimbursed. And I think that's good. You'll see when you see the budget tomorrow, it's pretty simple. And that's just because the main things that are on the budget are payments for some of, the Zoom license and the website hosting and, the email platform and that kind of thing. There's not a lot of other kinds of things. So do we want a process for nominations outside of meetings? And this is also Wyatt. Do we need a process for removal of officers? Absolutely. That's certainly something that's in there. And then we need to also to manage the membership records and that kind of thing. So, there's just a whole bunch of work still in this policies and procedures document. Do we need a process for a declaration or finding that a vacancy exists in situations where there isn't a direct request from the office holder? If members can request items to be added to the agenda, do we have a mechanism in place for that? So yes, that's another one. We do have I think there's a contact us kind of a tab, but it's really just kind of an email. I don't know that there's actually a tab. And we also need to have a mechanism in place for the executive. Right now, the mechanism is that the executive board considers agenda items for actual NCAC meetings, and we should provide some, with the input of the executive board, some guidance on how they make a decision on an agenda item, particularly if there's a controversial one. And I would hope that it would be to support the request in most cases. I think that should be the assumption for an agenda item. Well, we require that a declaration of a conflict be made part of the record. I think that should be specific. So yeah, we've got in there, I think already as well, how we define conflicts of interest. And we had talked before about doing some training of officers and committee members on what conflict of interest is. There's some really good stuff on the state websites about conflict of interest, because we all have, as Tom Sipe mentioned last time, we all have some reason for being on these committees and for being on the NCAC. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a conflict, and kind of how that training talks about how do you delineate what a conflict is. Having interviews for NCAC positions, nominations from the floor, define how candidates qualify for office, vetting, not vetting, etc. Selecting of authorized representatives. So yeah, for membership. So, you know, right now it's a little bit ambiguous if how you select those 4 people that can represent somebody. I think in most cases that's not going to be an issue, but if it is, how do they qualify? How do they decide? We have a whole bunch on Article 7 of subcommittees and task forces to follow up on. And this is Guy Sievert's information on the monitoring task force to actually get presented at meetings. And then we need to delineate the roll call vote procedure a little bit more. So meeting cancellation rules, ad hoc subcommittee definitions. So this is just, again, an initial start. And I'm sure we will be fleshing this out as we go into each section. So does anybody have anything right now that they would like to add to this list, or shall we just put it out there and maybe in a less formatted list? And Tom Sipe, maybe you and I can talk after about how we just do a topic list versus one that's got the actual information in. So what do you think?
Not quite sure I understand.
So this is kind of a combination of, this has got the policies and procedures actually delineated up here, and then in other areas, we've kind of stuck in topics to be discussed. Should we just have a separate document that's just a topic list?
I'd rather have a central controlling document and maybe delineate topics put them in a box or something so that they're more obvious. I think you also are probably asking me to clean up this document.
Oh yeah. At your leisure. I will post it. It's a mess.
One of the wonderments of Word. We're running different versions, so naturally they're incompatible. So I'm experimenting with Office Libre Word, which is the non-Microsoft Word.
Oh.
And my computer just went a little strange. Okay, there we go. I'm back. So that might solve the problem. You know, we had a 10-page document and Word can handle a 10-page document. Word cannot handle a 60-page document, which is what the community plan is. So I'm experimenting with that. I may wind up doing that experimentation. And if so, I would recommend that any changes be made with the same editor, same version.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and post this up to the website.
Okay.
Right at the conclusion of the meeting, so you can access it and clean it up.
Okay, fair enough.
Good R6. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let me just bring up, I'll stop sharing. Any other comments on this, or shall we just, you guys will be able to get it out of the folder. And I think though, until Tom cleans it up, I don't know if that's going to be helpful. It looks like Tom Prahodich has left. He had told us he was going to have to go. So let me share the project plan. Okay.
I looked at those and they look like the old project plan with the new title.
You think?
Yeah, I do. just at a glance.
Yeah, how about that? I mean, I couldn't think of another way to organize it. I think really having it by bylaws article is probably the best way to organize it, but I'm certainly open if you guys want to think of it differently.
I would think we would want to organize that by procedure, policies and procedures article number.
Okay.
And then we'll have to come up
So-
with titles for each one of those sections.
So not even have them related to the bylaws at all then, in terms of how they're organized?
I don't know what that would be. I mean, they are a series of actions necessary or procedures, obviously. And they bear some resemblance to some parts of them. And I think the link should be, if any, would be from the PNP back to the bylaws. The bylaws are, I don't, I don't object to it. I just don't think that for the purposes of tracking things, that is probably going to be more useful to have each individual section in the policy and procedures tracked.
Well, interesting. Okay, that's a completely different way than I was thinking of it. So I wasn't just lightly organizing it by the article name. I just assumed that's what we would be doing, but you raise a good point. So,
And because
so
some of
how
them have,
how would you organize it? I guess would you?
in column B, I would put the title of the particular policy and procedure. And if necessary, split them, because some of them are pretty substantial.
Right.
And basically track it the same way we did the bylaws, but just translate that, translate that into the titles for the policy and procedures. So at this level, it's not really important to track how they relate. Now, in the text of the PNP, we should relate that back, but that's the one way. That's how I thought of it.
So like this, and then it would somehow have some tracking. So we might actually end up taking out this column you're saying.
Yeah, column C might not be useful, but you can leave it there for now. But
Yeah.
because you're going to have several, thinking of subcommittees and task forces, that's a bunch of different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have multiple entries for that for tracking purposes.
Wow. Okay, I'm gonna have to get my head around that. Does anyone else have any thoughts about this? I guess I was thinking like for subcommittees and task forces, there would be separate ones under that like we have in the bylaws, but in some cases you wouldn't necessarily. So like there'd be one for the outreach task force and one for the bylaws subcommittee and that kind of thing, but it would all fold under an overall umbrella of related to subcommittees and task forces. So there'd be separate sections under that. But you're saying you might see it as a document that would have, say, section, the map, for example, the area would be in one area completely on its own. And then there might be something with outreach task force that might be in an area that's not necessarily, that's under O or something. And there somewhere else there'd be a communications task force that would be in a completely different area. Is that like maybe organized by alphabetical order or something, or how? I'm still confused on how that might be tracked.
Well, there's two different topics. One is how the document is organized. The other is how the tasks are identified and tracked.
Right. Well, for the project plan, right. But I guess my question is, how do you see the document being organized?
I think in rough order would be, they are right now in the same rough order, but I don't think that that's particularly important. I mean, it's a series of independent clauses, whereas the bylaws were interdependent. That's how I see them. And I could be wrong.
No, I'm trying to envision it. So does anyone else have any thoughts or comments or questions?
I'm wondering, is there anything in Robert's Rules and Orders that pertains to PNP, creations that we could reference or look at?
They call it standing rules, and when I've seen standing rules, they typically relate back to bylaws. So
Yep.
they're organized along the format of the bylaws, but
Policies and procedures aren't really a Robert's Rules of Order issue. It's really more personal than general. Can I voice a concern? And forgive me if it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's kind of just beginning to develop in my own mind, and that is, how far do we go? This sort of activity, policies and procedures, gives us a particular large amount of power for deciding how things are to occur for an organization. And that's different from bylaws, because bylaws are, those are pretty standard, even though they're broad and so on. How far do we go? And it seems to me that this is an ongoing process. We could be in for a very, very long haul. And of course, by the nature of policies and procedures, is unending. It doesn't end, because these sorts of things can be changed at any given time in the life of an organization. Quite different from bylaws, where you have to go through a process and then bring it back and let everybody know when it's all of that sort of thing. It's really a different process, and I think we need to focus on it a little differently. And when you talk about categories and so on, it makes sense to connect it with the bylaws, but not necessarily workable sense. For example, we might have a series of policies and procedures that has to do with administration, another one that has to do with finances, another one that has to do with communication, another one that has to, you see what I'm saying? They're really almost different categories that have to do with the life of the organization. So I'm not suggesting anything here. I'm just sort of verbally sharing this little stuff that's going on in my head here, and I suspect that probably some of it is occurring with the rest of you as well.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, Michael, that this is an ongoing process. And if we are wedded to the particular article order, then we start having problems with changing the order of things and having to renumber things. Word is not particularly friendly to that, and hopefully the new one is better. But it's, as laws are enacted, you have a constitution, which is the overall how you work, and then you have laws that are added, and they're sequentially numbered, and there's no, they are related within the text of it, but there's no particular reason to have any particular order.
Nancy,
mhm.
it seems to me that we're really not going to know what kind of format we want to have here
Good point.
until we sit down and do the interviews with the officers and get an idea about what's going to be required to facilitate their roles in the organization. And I think we could leave this as it is right now, but it may well change once we talk with those people. And I'm particularly kind of focused on Jeff and Mark in this particular situation, to identify for us what they need to administer the committee. And so I don't know that we have to decide this now. I think we should wait until we interview those people, and then maybe have a better idea about what our format's going to be.
Yeah, the category system predetermines, in a sense, what those policies and procedures are going to be, and maybe that's not a good idea. To predetermine may help those issues that we toss into those categories, but by their nature, they leave out other things because we don't see them, or we don't hear about them, or they don't rise up. And all of the policies and procedures manuals or documents that I've seen are really sort of ad hoc decisions that come along in the life of an organization. And then, we can try to pigeonhole them to make sense out of them in some sort of organizational feature, but that's not even necessary. The categories into which they're perceived or placed will rise, I think, after we have a body of policies and procedures that actually begin to focus on a category. Then that just helps to organize them. It doesn't really help to determine what they're going to be.
Yeah.
So it's an apples and what comes first is sort of the question.
Right.
It's a
So
chicken
I
and
think
the
you guys
dinosaur. Yeah.
are really bringing up some terrific issues here. And in terms of power and authority, your comment before, Michael, I guess I envision this as being similar to bylaws in terms of making sure that we get community input, but particularly the officers. So far, when I've talked to the various officers, they've been really positive about having something like this because they don't have one. And when they came into office, Mark, you could speak to this if you'd like, but there was nothing to be able to help them understand how to do their jobs. And so, well, maybe there could be some other kind of a committee that would work on something like this. It kind of logically falls to the bylaws committee. And I guess I take that back to other organizations I've been part of that have the standing rules or policies and procedures tied to the bylaws.
Let me
that they develop them, but with of course the input of the officers and community members.
Let me ask this question then. Are we dealing with two different things? One, policies and procedures, and two, job descriptions.
Well, I think job descriptions can be part of policies and procedures. I think what I've seen is that job descriptions are often in policies and procedures or standing rules, that they go into, the bylaws have job descriptions, but in a very broad brush way. And then the policies and procedures or standing rules, Robert's rules mentions both names, but they're basically synonymous, can have more of the detailed information of job descriptions. So maybe I'm making some fundamental assumptions. This is a really good discussion on how we want to have everything organized and whether it even falls to us. So I guess I consider this a fairly major activity for this coming year. It's not going to be just a quickie thing. But
Okay,
Mark,
so-
would you like to weigh in here?
Well, I don't know. I think the conversation is really a good one. Lots of different things. I don't know. I think that the member meetings are really important and running those well. And I have to say that having a parliamentarian, assigning a parliamentarian to the meetings has just been unbelievably helpful. It's just been tremendous just from the chair's position. I think I know how to run a meeting, but Michael has just done a fabulous job correcting, gently nudging, laying out ahead of time, and so that's been really, really, really helpful.
Would you tell would you tell that to my daughter, please?
So I mean, for me and the officers, I haven't run up against many sort of difficult things this year, to be honest. A few little curveballs, but nothing huge that I would say. But yes, I think asking officers, having a conversation with officers about what they see as maybe needing to be added to policies and procedures, or what something that Jeff probably has for sure some things, and Alex may too, and Chris. But
Yeah, particularly I think Jeff and then Chris had some questions about some of the financial stuff and what we mean in the bylaws by this or that could be spelled out a little bit more clearly. And Jeff had a whole bunch.
Yeah, so if we can really separate the idea of tracking the work versus what the document looks like ultimately, I think these are relatively atomic pieces, and we can assemble and decide what kind of structure the document has after we get done, or at least after we get, I think that's Wyatt brought that up. And I think that's a valid point. I think what we need to do right now is we need to track our progress. And how that gets assembled into the next document that gets voted on can be delayed. We don't need to know that right now. Unlike the
It might be
bylaw.
just something in terms of organizing the work, I guess, on who takes what pieces. And so in terms of, and maybe we defer that to another meeting, but do you see an issue with organizing the task list along the lines of bylaws, or are you suggesting, Tom, that we actually organize the task list differently?
I think we just have a list of tasks to be done and the people who have signed up to do them. And we can worry about how they get put together later.
I think when I think about this, I think in two different ways. One, let's move forward and start listing things and deal with them individually. And as Tom put it, atomically. I like that, by the way. And secondly, keeping in mind, while we do this, organization, because that organization later will be clarified and then reclarified and restated as we move along, as probably it ought to be. But when I think about policies and procedures, I think about principles, I guess. And one of the principles is how much, whatever it is, how much. Another one is who. And another one is what's that process? That kind of a process-oriented thing rather than identification sort of thing. Because the bylaws indicate structure and content, but the policies and procedures indicate how things actually occur and who does it and to what extent. And what are the limits, and who do you contact, and what are the dates, and those very distinct issues that we really do need to collect together first before we can organize them into some meaningful structure.
So are you suggesting, I guess what I'm hearing from some of you is that rather than trying to break these down into two-person groups by some kind of organization that might be along bylaws order or something else, that we really kind of brainstorm as a group in meetings, in public meetings, before we actually get to the work of trying to divide up how, the writing of it, because I think it would be tough to do the writing with 5 of us.
And I think also in conversation with the principals.
Well, yes.
That really is going, we need education. I need education. I need the insight into what is actually going on out there, and what are the speed bumps that these people run into, and how do we protect ourselves as an organization, and how do we make ourselves meaningful as an organization and effective, and so on. Those are the kinds of things that I need to learn.
So part of it would be, job descriptions to me would be under Article 4 officers, right? Sure. That would be job descriptions. Meeting kinds of things. There are a whole bunch of things around meetings, voting, how you change meetings, that kind of thing are all under Article 5. Subcommittees and task forces, delineating more what the responsibilities and roles are of the subcommittees and task forces would be under an Article 7. I guess I'm just struggling, I think, a little bit to understand. I hear you. I think it's a good analogy to have a discussion of, the Constitution versus the laws that come out. And I see that's very different. It's not related to the Constitution. So I see that. I'm just trying to still wrap my head around it. So I need to think more about it.
The advantage of having the structure for the bylaws was so that we didn't miss anything.
Right.
So we've identified, that helped us to identify all the areas we needed to cover. Those have been identified. Now we need to supply some details.
Right.
And we don't need to pre-structure those details at this point, I think.
Okay, so if we were to have, say, an area of job descriptions, for example, would there be a couple of people who would like to start working on that? That would involve the officers, right? We'd have to get in there and involve that. For under task forces and subcommittees, we could do our own for bylaws. We'd have to work with the community plan subcommittee, which Tom, you're already on it, for that one. There's some new ones though, like the communications task force and the outreach task force, that at this point we don't have anybody, well, there's nobody assigned to yet. Hopefully that will happen soon, and we would involve those people in any kind of discussion like that. And as we've said, it'll be a moving target, right?
Yeah.
But as
So-
we're doing this initial kind of a thing, it seems like we would have some information on how we could write some of those details. In terms of voting, there were a number of items on how to, defining how we do roll call voting in a little bit more, or the honor system, or so I can see some of that crossing lines, like it could involve Article 3 members as well as Article 5 meetings. So in
you would
terms
really
of,
be more comfortable with a target which was clearly defined. And I think many of us are saying, we don't need to define the target if we know what the components are.
right, and I'm just saying, I'm just trying to get my head around it. I haven't, so I guess so I can accept either way. I guess what I'm trying to think of in terms of moving forward is, do we, at this point, it sounds like our next meeting would be to, I think we've been saying for a few meetings now, we need to do the brainstorm of what goes into the document. And we have a little bit of one, but it's kind of a mess. Do we want to just have an assignment where we send in more information to Tom to be able to put in the brainstorm, and then Tom, you figure out how to organize it, and we come back to our July meeting that we had previously set up to figure out how to tackle that then? Because I do like the idea of, in terms of the actual initial writing, it seemed to work out well under Oregon public meeting law to have two of us meeting to come up with the wording and then bring it to the full group, rather than try to write something as a group together in an open meeting. But maybe I'm wrong about that. So
No,
this is actually a really good discussion.
I think that the two-person task, one or two people, was worked out very well. I think that we do the work, and then we come back, discuss it, and then iterate on that. I think that part of it worked very well. The only thing we're really missing here is an overall structure of where things go. But the editors can move things around. I can create a document out of a series of stuff, and we can make it look however we decide at the end, or at the first publication point, however we want to have it done.
Right. It's just, how do we assign the groupings if we don't have a structure? So it's a chicken and an egg kind of a problem, right?
We don't need a structure. We have topics.
See, this is where I have to admit my own lack of understanding and knowledge, and my choice would be to have a series, if you will, of interviews and meetings with the principals first, so that I can understand what their life is like in their position, what they worry about, and what we can do in describing and articulating policies and procedures that help them get their job done. I can't do that if I don't know what their job is. I know what a president is. I know what a secretary is, and so on. But I'm talking about the peculiar, idiosyncratic things that they run into, and all of that for me must, in some respect, relate to what Sarah can tell us about our ultimate relationship with the county. That's a whole bag there of things that they have in terms of expectations and hopes and dreams of unincorporated communities that are trying to organize themselves. Ultimately, that's part of it as well. So I think that there is a fact gathering task for us to do at some point.
For the time being, it seems to me that any task that we assign at this point should be focused on finding the people to really organize the questioning of the principles that we want to talk to. And for instance, I would see that with respect to Mark and maybe Alex together in an interview, two of us would get together to try to focus on the questions that we need to ask them, as well as soliciting their input. Once we get done with the gathering process for that information, then I think we could assign tasks for drafting. But until then, I think the two-person methodology should be focused on the interview process for each of those individuals, not necessarily the drafting at this point.
Okay. Does everybody agree with that? I mean, it sounds like a good approach.
I'm fine with that, but I don't see the need to take it out of the public laws issue. I mean, those are I could see the value in having it available for people to listen to. It's another example of involvement of the community in some decision-making processes that they are members of. So, I don't have a preference one way or the other. I could see the value of either one. So that's kind of my thought on that.
So Wyatt, are you suggesting that we set up 2-member task forces to be able to develop questions, but that the interviews themselves would be with the full?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the way you get the best input.
Okay, so
Right.
that's still the same task. It's that the task is going to have a follow-on for construction of task. So in terms of a task for the officers, you have the interview process or the pre-interview process,
Right.
and then the discussion with the person, and then subsequently we have drafting of text. So that's just a bit more complicated, but it is still the same task.
Yeah.
Those are subtasks within that task.
Right. So it sounds like what we're talking about is having an interview with Mark and Alex, and having an interview with Jeff, and having an interview with Chris, and an interview with Sarah. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
So if I could interject, I would say
Please.
almost that because Michael brought up a good point. When I heard him say it, it kind of rang a bell with me, which is this whole relationship between the NCAC and the county, and I believe that we're starting to see some just a little bit of ripple with the steering committee in terms of what they're wanting the county to answer about and what the county is dragging their heels on. And so that whole relationship between, so I guess what I'm saying is it might be nice to have Sarah, Alex, and Mark in a public conversation about how the county and the NCAC work together. What are the expectations on each part, maybe, to flesh that out a little bit? I'm still not totally clear about it. I mean, Sarah's been great. with helping us, but sometimes once it gets past Sarah, I'm not sure what happens with it. And where
Okay.
it goes and how the timelines are. And so, one would be timelines from the county, Sarah. What could we expect as a reasonable, I mean, we do this work, and in terms of, how receptive and how responsive and what's the timeline? I mean, I kind of like getting things done and
Mhm.
moving forward and moving on. You guys do too. I know you do. And so tell me the timeline for getting this done. What's reasonable?
Yeah.
Oh,
So let me give an update just because that
Yeah,
put a
Tom.
little bit of a cloud on the planning process. There was a miscommunication.
Yeah.
The county, Sarah, thought that the information had been provided. It got missed. And so we actually had the information. It wasn't the right answer,
Mhm.
but that's different than not responding.
Mhm.
So we are actually in sync in terms of the community right now,
Yeah.
the county right now. And that the details are that the previous community plan asked for a lot of things that the county cannot do. So that created some heat, but not much light. And so, I mean, that's a controversy, but that's just a technical detail.
Mhm.
The actual back and forth seems to be working. Sarah has been unavailable at times, but that's because she's a busy person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that it's just a classic ships passing in the night. Everybody thought they were okay, but they weren't.
Okay, so this is really helpful. So, and I know that Chris was having some questions for Sarah on financial stuff, and what to expect from the county. And so you've talked with Sarah about that with Mark, right, Mark? So that came up
Yes.
at the board meeting. And so it's almost like if we have Sarah in and Mark and Alex, I guess that would allow you guys to meet. Well, we'd still have you guys in for a public meeting, so we could actually ask the board to join us, but it would be focused more on the county relationship. So that's almost a category is the county relationship. And then have a separate interview, say with you and Alex on other things relating to chairing meetings or other issues. And then something with Chris for the financial kinds of things. Someone, I know Jeff's got a lot of input and thoughts and questions actually for secretary and the communications task force. So, and then any of you guys would join us for that, but we could have a group, these subcommittee twos of us, one or two, putting together some questions, and then the others could weigh in on the questions so that we are organized when we bring you in for an open meeting. Is that kind of what people are saying
Yeah.
you'd like to see? Okay. And then out of that, we might have a structure to organize that could be obviously movable. But I think, Tom, that's kind of one of the things that was some of the confusion on the document, the PNP, because I was assuming it would be in the format of the bylaws structure. And I think you were assuming it would be a completely different organization. Would that be
Yeah.
fair?
That
Okay.
would be a fair statement.
Okay. Wow, this is really interesting. Okay, it's been a good meeting. All right, so when we're kind of getting into the next thing, which is upcoming meetings, we had talked last time, and I'm not going away from this topic, it's just related. We had talked about last time about meeting in the third week of July and the third week of August and not doing earlier meetings. Is that still something you guys are interested in? I'm thinking it would definitely be important to do a July meeting while Mark is still with us. So
That sounded pretty grim.
yeah, still chair. is it fair to go ahead and do the third Friday? Or I know that's been a conflict for Michael some of the time. So should we go ahead and, Michael, do you know what you're set for July? Anybody else? Are you,
Yes, I do. Let me get that real quick here.
because right now we would be set for the 19th. Was kind of what we had talked about last time.
19th works okay for me.
And what time would it be, Nancy?
I think the same time of the 9:30, but
Okay.
that's flexible. How
Mhm.
does that look with people's schedules?
The 9:30 on the 19th, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Our piano group doesn't meet till the 26th. Although, by the way, on the 19th and 20th, our Piano International is presenting a concert in the vineyard at Ren Lumos Vineyard on the evening of the 19th and the evening of the 20th. We're bringing in a concert Steinway grand piano and selling 150 tickets, and it's just this is our 4th year of doing that. It's a lovely one, but that morning is fine. That morning is fine.
Okay, that sounds
I-
good. So
Yeah, I
you're
know
okay
the
with that,
night,
Susan?
yes, the 19th and 20th is the Nesco and Cottage Walk, which has not taken place in 6 years.
Oh,
So they're having a volunteer dinner the night of the 19th and the Cottage Walk is the 20th.
okay. So
Yeah,
the morning
it's-
would be okay of the
Yes,
19th?
morning of the
Okay.
19th is good.
Sounds good.
Okay. Mark, how does that work with your schedule? Because obviously that's going to be really important. Well, I guess for this meeting, we would be talking about scheduling some of these, but
Yeah, I'm sorry.
it'd be nice.
Yeah,
That'd be okay with you.
Yeah.
So I think what it might be good is to actually try to set this one up with Mark and Alex and potentially Sarah. So we have almost like a combined meeting where the first hour, perhaps we go over our questions, and the second hour we have the interview. How does that sound?
Mhm.
Or do you want to go back and have another meeting in 2 weeks? It's still on the calendar where we do a prep. Because, it just depends on how your summers are looking. Do you want to go ahead and really be charging hard, or do we, it's putting a little bit of a wrench in it with Jeff and Mark leaving. It kind of brings us up when we want to provide this kind of input. Obviously, a new chair and a new secretary would also need to be able to provide input, but it's important to get the input of the people who have done the job for a year. So my question is, do we want to have a meeting in 2 weeks, or shall we just go ahead and plan on the 19th?
I think the 19th is fine. We can do individual, 2-person things in preparation for
Right.
that. Yeah. But that's soon enough. I mean, the idea here is, of course, is to, grab the expertise of those 2 individuals early on.
Right. Okay.
I also
So-
think that if we had a meeting in 2 weeks, that's looking at the 4th of July weekend when a lot of people have plans.
Good point, Susan. Good point. Okay, so let me just ask, who would be interested in working on questions for the interview with Sarah, Mark, and Alex on how the county works with the NCAC and timelines with the county and that kind of thing?
I would.
Okay, Wyatt? I'd be happy to do that with you, or if somebody else would like to, then that's fine too. Okay, I'll just put myself down. How about working with Jeff on getting questions together for Jeff on secretary and communications task force duties?
I'm happy to be involved in that.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'll do that.
Okay. And how about Chris on treasurer duties and financial?
Let me,
I can
let me
do-
say,
I-
I'm gonna be covered over with the community
Yeah,
plan, so
you're,
I'm not
yes,
gonna be able to do much here.
no problem.
I
can
don't
do
know if
that.
that's all that detailed, so I'm happy to do that one.
Okay. All right, oh.
And Chris has been doing that one for a long time, so I do think that one will be pretty straightforward, really.
I think so.
He's a
He did have,
CPA, you know?
yeah, he did
Yeah.
have a lot of
Yeah.
questions though about how to do
Okay,
some of this
Okay.
stuff when we were doing the bylaws. So can
Okay.
people still hear me? I lost an AirPod. It went
Okay.
under my.
So unfortunately, I'm gonna need to leave. I have an appointment that I need to get to. You could sign me up for doing the providing a list of tasks to be done that I'll publish, and I'll volunteer to do the one on that talks about what documents should be published.
Okay, what documents?
In other words, the what the I think it's the second one. At least it used to be the second thing. We're talking about what needs to be in a document that's an official document from the NCAC. With
Okay, we
format.
can talk offline. I'm not sure what you mean. So, okay,
Well, it's in the current PNP as a to be done.
okay,
Okay.
okay,
fair enough.
and
I gotta
a
go.
list of topics. Okay, thanks a lot, Tom.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, so for the rest of you, and Todd, think about, well, he's gone. Think about, I'm going to stop sharing. I think the rest of these we can fill in later. We've got some starts here. And let me just save that. Think about what dates you might want to do for next year. I think we've had enough conflicts with Michael on Friday mornings that I think it'd be a good thing to move from Friday mornings. So would you be interested in a weekend morning or a, we did have some comments from people, not a lot, but from the community that it's hard for them to come during working hours. And so if we were to go to an evening meeting or to a weekend, it would be more accessible for some people. So, and we also need to make sure we don't conflict with the community plan people that are really going hard now. So I need to find out more about what their schedule is. But think about, we'll talk about in July meeting dates that you'd like to have. But for now, why don't we just plan on the July 19th and then the 3rd. Have you set your piano thing for the
No,
3rd
no, not yet.
Thursday in August?
No,
I mean, 3rd Friday in August, Michael?
not yet, not yet.
Okay,
Wait.
so we can talk about that
well,
next meeting too.
On the 23rd, it's tentatively on the 23rd of August.
Okay, good, because we're tentatively the 16th. So
Okay.
why don't we just plan on that?
That's working out. Yeah, that's working out so far. Okay.
Because Jeff does like to publish all of that. So so why don't we just plan on that for the summer months, and then we'll talk about what we do going forward. And I'm going to have to go back and think more about this whole organization thing. I think Tom raises a good issue, and it's been a great discussion. So thank you. I need to rethink. But any other comments on any of that? There are times when we go into a meeting and everything goes a whole new way. So it's always good. All right. Any other thoughts, comments? So we have our action item. I'll send out notes. Michael, actually, if you could get the minutes in too, that will help. But I'll send out a list of these tasks where we can come up with the initial set of questions, send them out to people, and then people can get back to the 2 people who do the interviews. Our quorum going forward is going to be 3 because we have 5 unless somebody steps up. Mark, since you're not going to be chair, maybe you'd like to join our committee.
Yeah.
Looking for less to do. Just kidding. We'd love to have you though. Okay. Anything else?
I think this is a good way to approach this. There's a lot of built-in ambiguity in the process, and to figure out what the lay of the land is first is a good way to go.
Mhm. No, I agree. I think it's good. It'll level set us too. I think some of us are more familiar than others with what the officers are doing. So
Yeah.
I think that'll help. And then there are some other things that I don't think relate necessarily to the officers directly, like some of the voting issues and some of the other things that were in the bylaws, but officers will certainly have their opinion about how we set that up, like they did for the bylaws themselves. But I think if we come up with proposals too and run it by the officers, that's one of the really great things about having an executive board, is that we can do that with a little more time before we even get into feedback sessions. But I do envision us having feedback sessions again, even though it's policies and procedures.
Sure.
And we may attract people or not. I think there's still a lot of community input or community interest. So I think that's all I have. Does anybody have? We don't have. Well, Mark, we're in public comment. Do you have anything you'd like to comment on? And you're muted.
I just I think they're just I think the STR, I know I talked with Sarah, and there isn't a burning desire to deal with the cap right now. At least we're not getting emails, and Sarah isn't getting emails. But so I do think she was going to move on that in the fall. I think she's dealing with right now maybe PC and Pacific City caps and some other community caps right now. I think Saturday she has a meeting with I can't remember which community. It might be Pacific City about caps, or maybe it's Terra Del Mar. I can't remember, but that's sort of out there. And I just say that it's not really. It really isn't anything related to the NCAC at this point. It's a county decision with some community input, but the NCAC is not the driver of that. We made it clear that we're not driving this conversation. The NCAC is not driving this conversation. And so it's not, anyways, I just say that because that's out there. And so when you talk about what should be in the PMP, I'm sort of starting to think about things. I don't think that's one that's in there, but I think there's going to be quite a few things that people are going to kind of throw on the table as maybe a consideration for the policies and procedures. So anyways, that was a sidetrack.
Yeah, that would be helpful if you have some specifics on that too, because certainly even if it's not under a formal auspice, it certainly has an impact on.
It does, right? Yeah.
On how we operate and some of
Yeah.
the emotions and that kind of thing. So.
Yeah. So but anyways, go ahead, Nancy.
I'm going to second what Tom Prohotic said. I wish you would reconsider.
No. Well, yeah.
You really have been a calming influence over the last year, and
I will third that. I will third that.
Yeah.
And I'll fourth that.
Yeah. Well, again, you guys have the community's done a lot of work, so it's really been wonderful to work with it. The only other thing I would say is that maybe I'm going to send Sarah an email today notifying her of these changes and also this date, because I don't know if her calendar's open on the 19th. And so I'll send her an email just as an FYI, and hopefully she can make that date.
I appreciate that. I was going to follow up with her as well, because I realized it's really hard to get on her schedule. So that would be great. And I'd like to work around that too.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk to her about just have this conversation pre-meeting about what we're going to talk about, so she has a little bit of a heads up about that. So
right, and when Wyatt and I meet and come up with some questions, we'll send those to you in advance and see if there's anything you'd like to add or change or whatever, because you're really in the driver's seat on what information you feel like we should have too. It really goes, that's really what we're seeking. So please feel free to give us input on what you'd like to present to us as well, what you think would be good to have in the policies and procedures about it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining
Okay.
us today, Mark. This is
Okay.
great.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Okay. And thank you, everybody. Have a great month, and I'll send out some follow-up on this. And Michael, if we can have your minutes fairly quickly, that'll help
Yeah.
too. Hopefully it'll be relatively short, actually.
Yeah, they will.
Not a lot of detail.
Important. But I
Yeah.
keep wondering what in the world is that, honey, I shrunk the kids backdrop in your, what is
You
that?
know, it's one of the standard ones that Zoom offers, and I need to upload now to the NCAC one, something better. So if anyone has a really good picture of Nesco one, please send them. I can upload it to the
Chris always
to the
has
Zoom.
I think.
Because I don't like this one, but I figure a San Francisco bridge or a thing of the earth in space is
Do you
and
know
really
that one of the ghost forests with Proposal Rock in the background? That is precisely the view out of our dining room.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Right there. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Well, send that picture.
Yeah.
I'll talk to Jeff and see if there's a picture we can stick up as a background.
I have one with those two eagles,
Oh.
bald eagles up on top of Proposal Rock,
Mm.
and we watch them all the time. They're sometimes there's a third one, but usually two eagles right up there. It's lovely.
Nice.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I'm
Okay.
going to adjourn the meeting. And it sounds like you're in an airport, Susan.
Yeah, I just flew in from Sydney and then flew up to Portland, so I'm reporting live from PDX here.
Wow.
I've been up for about, I don't know, 20
Oh,
hours.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Well, good on
Wow.
you. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, meeting adjourned at 10:57, and thank you all very much. We'll see you in a month, but I'm sure I'll talk to you all before.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to stop recording.